Listen up. I ain't here to waste your time. If you click out early, you're gonna miss the most messed up part of this whole video. The information that actually matters, the stuff that'll keep you awake tonight, comes at the very end, so don't even think about skipping. Tonight I'm bringing you 5 stories about real people and the twisted things they do in the dark. No ghosts, no monsters, just the terrifying side of human nature. Lock your doors and stay until the end. We're starting now. My name is Eric. For a long time, my life was quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet you get on a vacation, but a heavy, empty kind of silence. I worked long, soul-crushing hours at a warehouse, coming home way past midnight. I actually liked the silence back then. It meant nobody was asking me how my day was, or expecting me to be anything other than a guy who wanted to eat a cold sandwich and pass out. But looking back, that silence was a trap. It's probably why I ignored the first sign that things were going south. Every single night when I got home, I locked the door. It was pure muscle memory. I'd drop my keys on the counter, turn the deadbolt, kick off my shoes, and keep the lights low. It was a routine on repeat, night after night. But after a few weeks of this, I started noticing something off. The lock on my front door didn't look the way I remembered leaving it. It wasn't unlocked, and the door hadn't been kicked in, but the deadbolt was slightly turned. Just a few millimeters. It looked like someone had inserted a key or a tool and tested the resistance, then decided not to push any further that time. At first, I blamed the shifts. When you work 12 hours on your feet, your brain starts playing tricks. Memory gets fuzzy. I told myself I was just being sloppy, but it kept happening. Every damn night, I'd come home and find that lock in the exact same tested position. That's when the quiet feeling in my chest started turning into a cold weight. I started checking the lock 4 or 5 times before getting into bed. I'd pull on the handle until my arm was sore, just to convince myself it was actually secure. The messed up part? I still slept fine. My body hadn't realized yet that my apartment was being treated like an experiment. A few nights later, things got weirder. The hallway light outside my apartment was on when I arrived at 2 in the morning. My building uses those cheap timers, and everyone knows the lights go off after 11. But there it was, glowing through my peephole like a yellow eye waiting for me. I stood there for a long time, just listening. I expected to hear footsteps, a whisper, or even a door closing somewhere in the distance, but there was nothing. Just the low hum of the old building and the sound of my own breathing, which felt way too loud in that narrow hallway. I locked my door and told myself I was being paranoid. That's what we do, right? We call ourselves crazy because the alternative that someone is actually hunting us is too much to handle. Then came the night I got home earlier than usual, around 9 p.m. As I put my key in, I felt a tiny bit of resistance for half a second. It felt like the internal mechanism of the lock had just been snapped back into place from the inside. That pause hit me like a physical punch. I stood there with the key still in my hand, staring at the wood of the door, trying to convince myself it didn't mean a thing. When I finally walked inside, the air felt heavy, used. It's hard to describe, but the apartment didn't feel empty. It felt like someone had been sitting on my couch, breathing my air, and had just stepped out the back way, or into a shadow seconds before I walked in. I checked every room, the bathroom, the closets, even under the bed like a little kid. Everything was clear, but the tension was so thick I could taste it. I left the TV on all night, volume low, phone in my hand. And then, right as I was finally drifting off into a thin sleep, I heard it, a soft, metallic click coming from the front door. Slow, careful. Someone was on the other side, gently testing the lock to see if I was awake. I froze. My heart was thumping against my ribs, so hard I thought they'd crack. It wasn't an accident, it was deliberate. They weren't trying to break in fast, they were playing with me. A few days later, the notes started. The first one was a small piece of paper pushed under my door. It didn't have a name. It just said, "I noticed you checked the lock 3 times now. Good habits." My stomach turned to ice. They had been watching me. They knew my routine better than I did. Then came the second note. "The TV is too loud. You should sleep more." That was the moment I realized the walls didn't protect me. Someone was listening to my life, waiting for me to close my eyes. I moved out that same week. I didn't tell the landlord why. I just left. Now, every time I feel a lock resist even a little bit, I don't breathe, because I know that the person on the other side isn't always trying to get in. Sometimes, they just want you to know they're there. If you think Eric's door was the only thing being watched, you're wrong. That was just a warm-up. This next story, it makes the lock on your door feel like a joke. Let's get into it. My name is Michael. I spend most of my life staring at the white lines of the highway, driving long hours until the world outside my windshield starts to look like a movie on loop. Empty roads, gas stations that all smell the same, and those roadside motels that stop feeling like actual places and start feeling like brief pauses in a long nightmare. You get to a point where you don't even care about the name of the town you're in. You just want a bed, a lock, and a few hours where your brain isn't buzzing from the sound of the engine. That mindset is dangerous, man. It makes you careless because you start believing that nothing personal can happen to you in a place you don't plan to remember. You think you're invisible just because you're a stranger. That night, the exhaustion was hitting me in waves. Before I found the motel, I stopped at a gas station about 20 miles back. The place was a dump. I remember standing by the pump, the cold wind biting through my jacket, and feeling like someone was watching me from the shadows of the car wash. I didn't see a face, just the feeling of eyes on the back of my neck. I brushed it off, thinking it was just the 12 hours of driving messing with my head. I bought a stale coffee and got back on the interstate. The fog was getting so thick I could barely see 10 feet in front of my hood. I pulled off the interstate and found this place. It looked straight up dead. The neon sign was missing half its letters and flickered with a depressing buzz that sounded like an angry insect. There were only 2 or 3 rusted-out cars in the lot, and most of the windows were just black pits. It was the kind of place you don't think twice about because it looks too pathetic to be a threat. Inside, the lobby felt like a time capsule from the 1980s. It smelled like stale cigarettes, old damp carpet, and that cheap lemon cleaner they use to hide the scent of mold. The guy behind the desk didn't even look up when the bell rang. He just sat there, bathed in the blue light of his phone, looking like he hadn't slept since the turn of the century. He slid a heavy plastic key over room 104 and pointed a bony finger down a hallway that felt way too narrow, like the walls were slowly closing in. I walked down that carpet, which was worn thin by thousands of tired feet, and found my door at the very end. I thought being at the end of the hall meant peace and quiet. I couldn't have been more wrong. Inside, the room looked fine at first glance, but once the door clicked shut, the silence felt heavy. It wasn't a peaceful silence. It was the kind of quiet that makes your ears ring, like the room was holding its breath. I sat on the edge of the bed and noticed the small, messed up details that a normal traveler would miss. The desk lamp was turned at a weird angle, pointing directly at the pillow. One of the dresser drawers was hanging open just an inch, and when I looked inside, there was nothing but a single, dead moth. And then I saw it, a deep crease on the bedspread, right in the corner, exactly where someone would sit if they were watching the door and waiting for someone to walk in. I tried to shake it off, blaming it on a lazy cleaning crew, and dropped my bag. I checked the lock, but the door felt mushy. The deadbolt didn't make that solid thud you want to hear. I had to slam my shoulder against the wood just to get the latch to catch. I turned the TV on low to some random channel just to have some background noise and finally drifted off into a shallow, nervous sleep. I woke up at 3 in the morning. Not because of a noise, but because of a feeling of pure dread. I looked at the door handle and saw it moving. Slow, deliberate. Someone was outside, gently testing the lock, feeling the resistance of the wood. Then I heard it, the sound of metal sliding into the keyhole. Someone had a copy of my key. The door creaked open just a few inches, letting in a sliver of cold hallway light that cut across my legs like a blade. Then it closed again, softly. I stayed frozen for what felt like hours, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. But then I heard a sound inside the room, a soft rustling near my bag in the corner. Then the sound of a zipper. Very slow, very careful. My skin crawled as I realized someone was already in there, hiding in the shadows of the bathroom doorway. I sat up, my heart trying to explode, and saw a dark shape standing by my stuff. I asked who was there, my voice shaking like a leaf in a storm. A calm, flat voice replied, "Housekeeping. Leaving now." The person just walked out, no rush, no apology, wearing a dark hoodie that covered their face. When I checked my bag, everything had been moved. My clothes, my private papers, even my spare set of keys. Nothing was stolen, but they had inspected my entire life while I slept. I bolted out of there at 4 in the morning and didn't stop driving until the sun came up. I found out later from a local cop that a man had been seen on camera for 6 hours that night, standing outside different rooms, just leaning his head against the doors, listening to people breathe. He wasn't a thief. He was a collector of secrets. I don't stay in motels anymore. I sleep in my car with the doors double locked because I realized that the scariest thing isn't a locked door. It's knowing that for some people, a lock is just a suggestion. My name is Andrew. Back then, I worked nights. It's the kind of schedule that straight up messes with your head because your body never feels like it belongs to the same clock as everyone else. You start living in this half-awake, half-dead state where every silence feels louder and every room feels like it's 10 times bigger than it actually is. I didn't have a crazy life, but I had that bone-deep tiredness that makes you want to get away from every living soul. So, on my off days, I'd take these solo trips. I'd stay in cheap, low-budget motels just to sleep without hearing my neighbor's drama. I just wanted to wake up somewhere that didn't feel like my own routine. That trip, I picked a dump near a hiking trail. The second I stepped into the lobby, I hit a wall of stale air, that nasty mix of old carpet and industrial disinfectant. It's the kind of smell that sits in the back of your throat and makes you swallow hard. The woman at the front desk checked me in with a bored look. She mentioned, almost like an afterthought, that housekeeping had already finished for the night. She said it like it was a warning, but I didn't care. I just wanted my key so I could shut down. The hallway to my room was way too quiet. No TVs blaring, no muffled talking, no ice machine rattling. Just the hum of the flickering fluorescent lights and the sound of my own boots on the worn-out carpet. When a light above me buzzed and died, I told myself it was just an old building being trash. My room looked okay, but it felt cold. Not like air conditioning cold, but like the room had been holding on to the night for 10 years. I noticed the pillow on the chair was crooked, and being a guy who hates disorder, I fixed it. I turned the TV on low just to make the space feel less empty and took a shower. When I came out, the mirror was fogged to hell, and the temperature had dropped even more. My eyes kept drifting to the closet. The door was wide open, and the darkness inside looked heavy. Like light didn't want to go in there. I forced myself to lie down and eventually, exhaustion won. I fell into a deep sleep, but I woke up to a sound that barely registered. A soft brushing sound, like fabric moving against carpet. And then I heard it, breathing. Slow, heavy breathing that wasn't mine. It was coming from right inside that dark closet. The moment I shifted my leg, the breathing stopped instantly. Whoever was in there wasn't just hiding. They were waiting for me to wake up. I stayed paralyzed. My heart was thumping so loud I thought it would wake up the whole floor. I stared at the closet in the dim light coming from the parking lot. The door wasn't wide open anymore. It was partially closed, leaving a narrow, black gap. Someone had pulled it from the inside while I was dreaming. I didn't wait to see what would happen next. I moved backward toward the main door, never taking my eyes off that gap. My feet were freezing on the carpet, and my hands were shaking so bad I could barely turn the handle. I bolted into the hallway and ran to the front desk. The lobby was empty. No woman, no security, nothing. Just a desk phone ringing, and ringing in the dark. It felt like a loop in a horror movie. Finally, the woman from before came out from a back room looking like a zombie. I told her someone was in my room, in the closet. She looked at me like I was some kind of crackhead. She said housekeeping was long gone and nobody else had keys. She agreed to go up with me, probably just to prove me wrong. We went back to the room, and I watched her every move. She checked the bathroom, under the bed, and then she yanked the closet door open. It was empty, not a soul. She gave me that "you're crazy" look and said I probably had a nightmare. I demanded a new room. She gave me a key for a room way down at the other end of the building. In the new room, I jammed a chair under the door and left the closet wide open so nothing could hide. I sat on the bed, listening to the building breathe, and then it started. A slow, metallic squeak of wheels on carpet. A housekeeping cart. It was moving unhurriedly, closer and closer, until it stopped right outside my door. No knock, no service, just that same heavy, uneven breathing on the other side of the wood. I felt a soft pressure against the door, like a palm resting there, feeling for my vibration. I didn't move. I didn't make a sound. Eventually, the wheels squeaked again, and the cart moved away, fading into the silence of the hall. The next morning, I checked out. A different guy was at the desk. When I told him about the night housekeeper, his face went pale. He told me they hadn't had a night maid in 6 months. The woman who used to do it just stopped showing up one day, but they keep finding her cart moved to different floors every morning. I didn't look back. I realized that the routine of that hotel didn't need a person to keep going. It just needed a victim. My name is Jason. I've worked in hotels long enough to stop seeing them as places where people just rest their heads. To me, they're like massive, iron machines that never really shut down. Doors open, doors close, keys get handed out. Someone always needs fresh towels. Someone always complains about the noise in the room next door or the smell of the carpet. After a few years on the night shift, you start to believe you know every single sound the building can make. You think nothing can surprise you anymore because you've seen every kind of weird guest, every drunk mess, and every late-night technical glitch you can imagine. But that's exactly why this thing got under my skin so fast. It didn't come in loud. It didn't break a window or scream. It came in quiet, disguised as just another part of the boring midnight routine. I was working nights as the house person. That basically means I'm the guy who handles maintenance, helps the cleaning crew when they're slammed, and backs up the front desk when things get slow or some guest starts acting like a straight-up animal. That night was slow in the worst way possible. It wasn't a peaceful kind of slow. It was heavy, like the whole building was holding its breath, waiting for a gear to snap. Brianna was on the desk. She was new to the night shift, polite, but you could see the nerves in her eyes. She was still learning how that quiet can feel wrong in a place with 100 empty rooms. We were just killing time, talking about nothing, and then I remembered the pool towels. The day shift was always lazy, leaving the bins half empty, so I figured I'd go refill them before the morning rush started. The pool area was tucked away behind a heavy, steel-reinforced door that stayed locked 24 hours a day. Guests needed a special key from the desk just to get a foot inside. That mattered, man. It meant that if anyone was in there, we'd have a record of it. At least, that's what I used to tell myself to feel safe. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, and the air hit me like a physical punch to the chest. It was thick, warm, and smelled like chlorine and something else, something sweet and rotten. The humidity was oily. It felt like it wanted to crawl inside my pores and stay there. The lights were reflecting off the stagnant water, and every single step I took on the cold tile echoed back at me, sounding like someone was walking exactly 3 steps behind me. I went into the storage room to grab the towels, and as I bent down to reach for a stack, I heard it. A splash. Not a small drip, not a tiny ripple from the filter. A real, heavy, violent splash, like someone had just tossed a heavy body into the deep end. I stood up so fast, my vision went blurry for a second. I expected to see a guest laughing or a door swinging shut, but the room was dead empty. No footsteps, no voices, No wet footprints on the tile. Nothing. Just a lifesaver drifting in the middle of the pool, spinning slowly. That lifesaver usually hung on a hook on the far wall, and when I looked, the hook was empty. My heart started thumping against my ribs like a hammer. I pulled the thing out of the water, dripping all over my boots, feeling this flash of pure, hot irritation because I couldn't explain how it got there. I checked the lockers, the showers, even the chemical room. Empty. Just me and the echo of the water. I didn't tell Brianna about the pool right away. I didn't want to sound like some rookie getting spooked by a piece of plastic. I put the lifesaver back on its hook and tried to convince my brain that some guest had played a prank, even though I knew the door had been locked the whole time. About 2 hours later, a maintenance request popped up on the screen for a room on the 4th floor. A toilet issue. Brianna checked the system and said the room was supposed to be empty. No one was scheduled to check in until the next afternoon. I grabbed my master key and headed up. The hallway was dim, the lights flickering with that low, electric hum that makes your teeth ache. The carpet was so thick it swallowed every sound, making the whole floor feel like a tomb. I opened the door to room 409, and the air inside was freezing. I'm talking bone-chilling cold, like the room was holding onto a winter that didn't exist outside. I went straight to the bathroom to fix the tank, trying to work fast so I could get back to the lobby. But as I was reaching into the water, the temperature dropped even more. It felt like someone had laid a block of ice against the back of my neck. The hair on my arms stood up straight. My stomach turned into a knot of cold lead. My body knew I wasn't alone before my brain could even process the fear. Then I heard it. A dull, heavy thump from the bedroom area. It sounded like someone had just sat down heavily on the mattress. I froze. My hand was still inside the toilet tank, dripping wet, and I was staring at the bathroom doorway. The silence was so loud it was ringing in my ears. I stepped out into the main room, inch by inch, and that's when I saw the phone. The room phone was hanging off the nightstand, swinging back and forth, the cord stretched tight as a wire. And there, in the corner by the window, was a tall shape. It was standing completely still, darker than the shadows around it, like it was absorbing the light from the hallway. I couldn't see a face, no eyes, no clothes. It was just a presence, a hole in reality. My chest locked up so hard I couldn't even gasp for air. The shape shifted just a tiny, fluid movement, and that was all it took. I didn't grab my tools. I didn't close the door. I turned and sprinted. I hit the stairs and flew down them, feeling like something was reaching for my heels the whole way down. When I got to the desk, Brianna looked at me like I'd seen a ghost. I didn't say a word. I just grabbed my jacket and walked out. I quit that night and never looked back. I realized that the pool being locked didn't mean a thing. Whatever is running that hotel machine doesn't need a key, and it sure as hell doesn't need a guest. It was just waiting for me to walk into its routine. Before you scroll, there's one thing you need to sit with. None of what you just heard started loud. None of it needed force. Every single situation worked because it followed a routine, because someone paid attention, because someone waited long enough for things to feel normal again. That's the part people miss. The danger isn't the moment everything goes wrong. It's the time before, when nothing looks urgent and you convince yourself you're overthinking it. That's where this stuff actually lives. If you made it this far, you already know why that matters. You didn't need monsters or demons to keep listening. You stayed because this felt close, because it felt possible. If you're the kind of person who sticks around for stories like this, you already belong here. Join the crew, subscribe, and keep your doors locked the way you remember them. We'll talk again soon.